Okay, so we have been talking about how we take a pain signal from a nociceptor through the primary afferents, known as our first order neurons. That then either creates a reflex or it also creates a synapsis with what we call our second order neurons that are going to take it up to the brain. And where we are now are those higher centers. So, what happens when it's up in the brain? Specifically, again, that second order neuron for when we were talking about the spinal thematic tract took it to the thalamus. So again, first order neurons, second order neurons. Now the second order neurons are going to take it to the third order neurons. Okay, so it's gotten up to the brain. They're now going to synapsis with bringing that signal into the sensory cortex, specifically the area of the brain responsible for sensing pain. Okay, so the thalamus to the cerebral cortex is our third order, and that's going to allow for central processing. The sensory cortex is going to decode that signal and decide what will be done with that information, and it will direct that information out via descending tracks. So now we're taking things from the brain and going out distally, traveling down the spinal cord, descending. So we talk about descending tracks. So whenever we start talking about pain here, ascending tracks are things that come from the periphery. Descending tracks come from the brain. And so we control pain both directions, potentially. So that signal is usually going to come down in the form of motor neurons, right? There's supposed to be some action to this pain, whether it's to jump away or move our hand if we're touching something hot, or potentially to spasm and to guard, right, to protect the area. We'd also get signals sent down in our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system in order to get the responses that will happen for the inflammatory response phase. And again, these are also connector neurons or interneurons, we call them interchangeably. So these are going to be kind of these generic cells that are going to take this information from the second order neurons, from those connector neurons in the thalamus to the sensory cortex. So again, just to review, first order neuron in the red came in, synapsis with an interneuron or our second order neuron. It crossed the midline of the spinal cord, got onto one of its highways, and in this case the spinal thalamic highway. And it's going to transfer up in through the spinal cord, through the brainstem, eventually into the thalamus. And then our black arrows here, those are our third order neurons, taking it to the sensory cortex of the cerebral cortex. So specifically the homunculus, which you have a video again that kind of that you can watch that shows what this diagram really means, that different areas of the sensory cortex of the homunculus are responsible for sensing the sensation of different parts of the body. So the foot, the hand, the face, the jaw, so on. And everything is mapped in here. The the density of the receptors directly relates to the amount of space within the homunculus that area has. So if you are a very sensitive location and you have lots of different receptors, you're going to have a bigger area of the homunculus that is going to be responsible for understanding and sensing, processing that sensory information. The efferent impulses that produce motor or behavioral or inflammatory responses, again, the response, those are going to originate from the homunculus and travel back down other tracks that are going to come down to the levels needed and then go out via their own ordered neurons out to make the action happen. So again, second order, so first comes in, second order is the transmission up into the thalamus, third order takes it to the sensory cortex to be processed. And then the action happens after that with motor neurons. Another just diagram, this one from your book, shows that kind of same process. So the receptors through those first order neurons, eventually we get into the spinal cord where we connect with the second order neuron that transmits up into the thalamus, and then out to the cortex as a third order neuron, and then there's fourth order neurons are the sensor or are the kind of the receptors and the parts of the brain that are going to take that information inside the homunculus. So if you haven't watched that video yet, make sure you watch that video about the homunculus. It'll give you a lot of good information.